Yeah, there's just so many. Well, for an operation that's really just trying to expand its sales into another country, there might not be any challenges. I mean, they could be selling things on the internet, or so right there, if there's significant enough revenue in that country, you should get a local council perhaps to look at the local regulations governing internet sales and whether or not they have to pay taxes there. But if you're calling in, or they're sending you a purchase order by fax, and you ship your goods out there, and there's a bill of lading and a letter of credit kind of thing, then there's not really any significant problems. But if you start to open an office there, or if you have a distribution relationship, you have to worry about a contract and the enforceability of that contract. Then you have to start thinking about what country are we dealing with, and what kind of laws are applicable there. And for that matter, maybe the governing law should be New York or some other U.S. jurisdiction to make sure that you can actually enforce that in a court here. And then if your operations are significant enough in that country, maybe you have to think about actually forming let's say a Thai company, or an Indian operational company. Why would you do that? The principal reason people think about is to limit their liability going up to the, in this case, U.S. corporate parent. If that company gets sued, if that company incurs some other sorts of obligations, you don't want to have to deal with that necessarily at the parent level. Also, if you're working in particular regulated businesses in particularly emerging growth companies, countries like China, you often have to institute a special structure, because you can't actually own that operation or control that operation in that country. There's a famous structure now called the WFOE structure in China, the wholly owned foreign enterprise. So what you do is you have your U.S. corporate parent, and you form a wholly owned Chinese subsidiary, but that subsidiary can't conduct, let's say, certain internet business, certain telecommunications business, and then you have contracts between it and a new Chinese operational company. If you're opening a new business, or if you're acquiring a company there, then that's the company that you're buying, that provide your WFOE company all the rights and obligations of that company. So you don't really control it, you don't really own those operations, but you own all the rights of it, and you own all of its obligations. So it's effectively like owning that company. And Wayne, I think, would tell you that one of the big reasons to form a sub in a foreign country to deal with the other issues is to hopefully reduce your taxes.
If I may add, when you're going overseas, it's really an evolutionary process. I mean, you may want to test the European waters in whatever country we're talking about. And initially, you may want to do that through independent contractors, because if you hire employees over there, or if you set up an office in a country, you are in effect have a permanent establishment in that country, which is going to require you to file income tax returns there. So it really depends on how much business and what kind of business you're going to do as to how you should be structured over there. And it's the same thing if you have people coming over into this country, in terms of how best to do this. Do you do it with a branch? Do you do it with a separate subsidiary? And Joe is right. I mean, typically, from a tax standpoint, once you get involved in that other country, you want to have a separate entity there, because for tax purposes, you really want to stop the tax authorities kind of at the water's edge, so that they are only going to have to deal with what goes on in that particular country rather than globally.
Yeah, I would just say very clearly, if the U.S. tax rate, let's say, is 30% on your corporate income, and it's 25% in Ireland, then you might want to ring fence, is the typical international tax accountant or lawyer expression, the income in the other jurisdiction, and have all your contracts between that sub and counterparties, so that it's clear you're going to be taxed at a lower rate. And the other thing is that when you're working like Blue Matrix with sort of an offshoring group of IP developers, even though you may not have a subsidiary there, you have to be very careful to protect your intellectual property, whatever they're developing for you, having the right sort of consulting agreement that has them assign all their inventions over to the U.S. company and keep all the stuff that they develop confidential.
Now, obviously, intellectual property you need to get right from the get-go. But how about these other issues, ring fencing, and can one wait until you have some success, or can you get in trouble if you don't have it right from the start?
I mean, I personally, I think it's like falling in love, right? You know when you have to. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you should consult with your attorney or something. I know when it's time. It's just a certain level of activity. If you lease property there, if you begin to hire too many, if you hire your first employee there, it's such that you have to begin withholding taxes to the local tax authorities rather than dealing with a bunch of consultants who are working on their own with their own facilities, with their own equipment. That's sort of the dividing line I see.
And from a U.S. tax standpoint, you can't have dependent contractors overseas. Because if they're dependent, which means you tell them what they do, when they do it, and how they do it, that really is, they're dependent contractors versus independent contractors, which they do what they do, when they do it, and when they want to do it, and you pay them an hourly rate. The U.S. government and the foreign governments are going to take a look, and if you have dependent contractors over there, they're going to say they're really disguised employees, and you really have a permanent establishment here because you have employees here, and now you're subject to paying taxes here. So you have to be careful. You know, in the beginning, as I said, it's an evolutionary rather than a revolutionary process as to how you're going to grow. And I think it's, you have to take a look and see what makes the most sense for you. But once you start doing things on pretty much a continuous, ongoing basis in a foreign country, you're probably going to be deemed to have a permanent establishment and doing business there. I mean, we had one client of ours that sent somebody over to the United States 14 times in 1 year on a tourist visa. Now, I mean, we told them, look, I don't know how the, customs, how they connect with IRS and when they do. I've had a few instances where they have. But I mean, as much as we all love this country, I don't think people are coming over here 14 times in 1 year, on holiday. So we had to have them set up a separate subsidiary here, got that gentleman to have a work visa in order to make sure that we kept the company clean, and that they have taxes over here, and they pay taxes in the home country, which in this case is Spain.
Yeah. Last thing I would add to that challenges thing is that whenever you're working overseas or building something overseas, you often have to worry about the labor laws and the immigration laws. And finally, you have to worry about people who will try to capitalize on your lack of information in that jurisdiction. There's always, I see my clients getting quotes from, the solo practitioner to the big law firm, big international U.S. firm, UK firm, all these things in between, compliance services, and they have a lot of companies that fill this market, and the pricing ranges dramatically. So you should get at least a second opinion or someone that to help you manage that bidding.